Hi folks, this is video number 119 and the title is Smart Deer. This short story is about two examples of how smart deer really are. Two times I witnessed the first example that occurred in Scottsville. Coming off Scottsville Road to the south was a single-lane dirt road through the woods that came out on the other side of the hill at the Jenningsville Cemetery. Of course, it was named Cemetery Road. After leaving Scottsville Road, there was a small rise and then a downhill slope. At the bottom of the slope was a right-hand dogleg turn, starting uphill again. The electric company owned 1,400 acres in the Scottsville area. Originally, they were going to dam the river and flood the valley for a water supply for a nuclear power plant. Of course, we didn't get the plant. They decided to build it in the Berwick area. The electric company entered into a forest game project agreement. That turned the area into essentially another game land, as we were to control it and set it up accordingly. We created 4 decent-sized parking areas. One of these areas was at the bottom of the grade and to the left of the dogleg turn I mentioned above. There was enough room for maybe 8 to 10 vehicles. I came through on patrol about 9:30. There were hunters already back in their vehicles eating lunch and having a drink. So I checked licenses and ID and made sure the firearms they had in their vehicle were unloaded. About the time I finished with my normal checks, one fellow started to complain to me that there were no deer. They had been out all morning and saw nothing. Now it was 9:30 a.m. So how much time did they spend in the woods? If you figured walking in and out, probably no more than an hour and a half. That hardly adds up to all morning. As this person was berating me about no deer, I caught a movement behind him. I stopped him and told him to turn around. He looked at me and said, "What?" I again told him to turn around. There were about 8 or 10 deer walking through the parking area and proceeded across the road into the woods on the other side, about 20 yards behind his car. This actually happened twice in 2 different years in the same spot. Maybe they were the same deer. In my mind's eye, I could see those deer huddled in the bushes. And once the hunters were back in their car, they knew they were safe to move. The next observation took place on the Stark farm at the top of Douglas Hollow. I was coming out Douglas Hollow Road, traveling north to south. A few hundred yards in, the road went up a steep hill and dropped off into a long slope into the hollow, which was about a mile away. As I crested the hill, I took a quick scan of the large reverse L-shaped field to my left. This was a very large field in this area. The bottom of the L shape was at least 500 yards long. The vertical part of the L ran from the road to the top of the hill at about 400 yards. The distance between the left and right side of the vertical part was about 150 yards or more. There were 2 hunters. One was on stand at the corner of the woods that formed the L. He was smoking a cigarette and scanning the woods and looking down the field to the left. On the right side of the field, there was a hunter slowly walking along the edge of the woods that ran from the road to the top of the L. This hunter was looking at the ground or his feet the whole time. What I saw next caused me to grab my binoculars with 18 power zoom. Standing out in the open, in the middle of the vertical part of the L, was a huge buck. 10 points, no broken tips, heavy beam and good-sized brow points. He was just standing there, but was well aware of the 2 hunters and was watching them close. The guy to my left never turned and looked out into the field. The other guy just plodding along, looked at the ground the entire time he climbed that hill. He never looked up. The buck never moved. As the guy who was just plodding along got even with the buck turned his head to watch him. When the hunter was about 20 yards past him on his way to the top of the hill, The buck took off. He ran full bore down the middle of that big field and crossed Douglas Hollow Road about 30 yards in front of my truck. He trotted through the corn stubble on the other side and proceeded down into the woods towards the creek. Those two hunters never had any inkling of that deer's presence. And that concludes this short story about smart deer. In case you were wondering, the title slide on this has a deer on it that resembled very closely to the one I'm talking about. All the best, folks. All the best.